Yeah, well, it's very nice to see so many friends in the audience and people who will probably heckle. And it is fun to do this at a really complex, kind of fascinating moment in media, the collapse of social media, the rise of generative AI, lot to talk about. And of course, I've been building a media company while writing about it and kind of living in a glass house. And we'll hopefully, it's fun to have these kind of transparent conversations with people, some of the people doing the same thing. So Jen, I first got to know when we were on the Obama 07 campaign. I was just thinking about how hard it would be to explain to the 2007 versions of ourselves what we do now.
It was pre-Twitter.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Pre-Semafor.
Pre-Semafor. For sure, pre-Semafor.
And you're now the host of this kind of runaway success on MSNBC, more than 1 million viewers an episode on Sundays, which is pretty unprecedented. And you've switched sides pretty dramatically. Like you were the most on-message, disciplined press person, for many, many years, and you're now doing the interviews. And I'm curious, what's been most surprising?
That's such a good question. The thing that's probably been most surprising to me from I don't know if it's switching sides. I'm going to just refute that notion because I think the thing that actually that is in common of working in government and working in media, now that I've been in media for 8 months, I guess, is that there's just like a lot of smart, nerdy people wandering around looking for more information about things to go tell the public. And so you think about it as so different, but actually there are things that are very much in common. What I have learned a lot about are the technical sides about it. I will tell you, about a week ago, I had Cy Vance, the former Manhattan District Attorney, on, and I really wanted to ask the right questions and make sure we were getting to the point of it. The piece I was most nervous about was handing off the show to Alex Witt, who was next, because the technical stuff is also new to me. So that part's been kind of new, but otherwise, I've tried to apply things that I'm interested in, working with a great group of producers to this new job.
And do you consider yourself a journalist?
I do. Because how do you define being a journalist? Now I'm going to ask you this question.
I don't know. I was once told it was an out-of-work newspaper man.
Well,
but,
Well, here's how I think about it. First of all, journalism has changed dramatically. Semafor is an example of that, right? And even when I was in the White House working in government, it really was already all on a spectrum. It wasn't just the New York Times, Washington Post, ABC News, and then everything else wasn't considered part of journalism. It's all a big, broad scope of things. And so to me, journalism is providing information to the public, helping make things clear, explaining things, having conversations with people want to learn more about. And so I think there is a broad expansion of what that is.
Yeah, I did go into this thinking I'd be very unlikely to throw Jen Psaki off message, but now
I don't know
then
if
you
that's
told me
it's an honest answer.
You told me this is now like the loose, fun Jen Psaki who's not going to move markets if she misspeaks. So
I hope not.
And I'm curious how you think about your own path, your own career. Like, you're now in a sort of an opinion space, basically, that is in some ways adjacent to politics. Do you think about, well, look, I want to go where sort of follow a path like George Stephanopoulos and become kind of a straight news person? Do you look at that and think that's what you want to do? Is sort of this where you are, where you want to be?
At first, I think of it less opinion, more kind of informed. It would be inauthentic if I did my job and didn't talk about the fact that I'd worked for 2 presidents in a White House, spent time in the State Department and on many presidential campaigns. If I just erased that from my history, that wouldn't be particularly helpful to viewers, right? There are a lot of people I hugely admire. George Stephanopoulos is certainly one of them. And I did talk to him and ask for his advice before I made this transition.
What was his advice?
He told me that one of the things that I should think about when people ask me about what's happening in the Biden administration is to give the kind of advice that I would give to him in a room, right? So if somebody's asking what's happening in this situation, why are they making this decision they're making, I can say, well, this is the advice I would give if I were there, because that's informed, that reflects the experience and perspective I had. But there's also a lot of people I admire who are providing a range of journalism out there. And but there's only one George Stephanopoulos. Like, there's one Rachel Maddow, there's one Nicole Wallace, there's one Kara Swisher. I'm just going to embarrass her because she's coming up next. But I have gotten advice from a lot of people. I have learned from a lot of them. I've sat with a lot of those people and watched them do what they do, how they interview people, how they prepare. And that's one of the benefits I've had of starting in September and not launching the show until March.
There is this now very well-trod path from White House communications, political communications, to television. I think probably the last 4 or 5 administrations, you've seen folks in jobs like yours move into TV and move into news, basically. And I'm curious, what do you make of that? What does that mean? What should Americans think about that?
I mean, I can't speak for all Americans anymore. I don't do that anymore. I don't speak on anyone's behalf.
Must have been nice.
I will say that what I know, or what I try to apply to my job now, is I think what people like George Stephanopoulos, Dana Perino, another person who I've gotten advice from, Nicole Wallace, tried to do as well, which is to help make sense of things happening in government, on political campaigns, in policy issues and debates. And when you've sat in the room and you have the perspective of knowing the vice president's office is around the corner from the chief of staff's office, and you can also, which is something I tried to do, call out when things are not a 5-alarm fire, right? Everything is not a 5-alarm fire. There are times when there are, but everything is not. And you can do that if you've actually sat in the room and had the experience of doing that. So I don't know if I can speak for all of what every American thinks about it, but I know from talking to a lot of those people that is something slightly unique that all of them bring to it.
Do you worry at all that it erodes the line between news and government information, propaganda, whatever you want to call it, when you can pass it that easily, when you can change hats that easily? I mean, that's certainly kind of the purist view.
Well, I mean, I'm a believer that you should be judged by what you do, and I don't hide from the fact that I don't see two sides of the abortion debate. I don't see two sides of the issue of gun reform. I don't see two sides of whether people should choose who they can marry. I don't hide from that. I don't try to both sides that, because that wouldn't be authentic. I just spoke on behalf of a range of people who had strong beliefs on those issues. But I also think that to suggest that not being able to bring an informed perspective from actually living and experiencing and being a decision maker in these environments, in government, on campaign trails, that is not valuable to the debate or to the public, public forum, I think is leaving out a big pool of people who can make sense of things.
Is the president watching the show?
I have no idea.
You haven't heard from him?
I do stay in touch with people in the White House, but I do not know if the president is watching the show or not. I don't have any news to break on that.
All right. I promise not to ask you too many White House spokesperson questions, but what do you make of his sort of half announcement? He's now said that he's planning to announce that he's running. What is the sort of plain English point of that, as opposed to just saying he's running?
Okay, so this is a good example, because I did spend a year and a half working for the guy, so hopefully I can give you some perspective. One, if you're him, you're watching what's happening on the other side of the aisle, with Trump out there, with DeSantis maybe out there, with a pool of other people trying to figure out how to take out Trump. That all feels a little chaotic and insane and crazy. You're going to let that happen. For him, he's going to run, and I believe he's going to run. I think he just told Al Roker this morning that he's going to run. He's just not ready to announce yet.
Yeah, that's confusing to me.
Well, it shouldn't be that confusing. Here's why. Because once you announce you're running for president, you become a different kind of target. You have to spend political money when you're out on the campaign trail. You have to have a formal campaign up and running. And you can no longer live in just the world of being president, being competent, meeting with foreign leaders, meeting with elected officials, going to disaster sites. In many ways, that's the benefit of running for re-election as president, is all the pomp and circumstance and all of those things surround you. It's not being in the daily food fight. So for him, I think it makes sense for him to wait as long as possible, and I think that's what they're thinking in their minds.
And over there on the chaotic side, Ron DeSantis has a very specific press strategy, which is does not talk to unfriendly press, talks to some conservative outlets that treat him particularly well, talks to Fox News, talks to a handful of very small Florida websites that will sort of ride or die for him. And I think actually gets a lot of admiration on the Republican side for having such a hostile relationship with the press.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that going to work for him in the primary? Is that a good idea?
It's not working so far. I mean, if you don't differentiate yourself from the person who's the front runner, regardless of what media you talk to, it's hard to beat the front runner.
So he needs a change you can believe in?
I'm not sure he needs change you can believe in, but he needs to show a different path or have a specific lane that differentiates himself from Trump.
Do you think he ought to be talking to, to you and me?
He's welcome to. Ron DeSantis, if you're out there, we can settle up. We're ready to have a chat with you. I think winning a primary, this is what's challenging in how politics is set up on both sides, right? Winning a primary means appealing to the base of your party, and the challenge is not going so far to one side that you can't come back. And if you watch what Ron DeSantis has done, what Governor DeSantis has done, he has not differentiated himself from Trump on a range of issues, and then he has gone so far out of whack on things like LGBTQ rights, on abortion, on guns. I mean, he signed a concealed carry bill in the dark of his office with no press, right? Those things are hard to then explain in a general election. I'm not saying his job is easy, but he could be an alternative to Trump, and it's not clear that he is at this point.
I believe you guys did an event with him when, after the hurricane when you were in
Yeah.
the White House. Did you feel you learned anything about him then?
I wasn't at that particular event, but what I will say is that, governors have an ability to work with presidents, even ones they don't necessarily like, and I assume he doesn't love Joe Biden in every aspect of every aspect. And that was a moment where there was a disaster in Florida, or I think it was when the buildings collapsed. Am I remembering this correctly? Yeah. And you do have human connection and human moments, but that kind of goes out the window when you run for president on the other side of the aisle. So I wasn't on that particular trip. But politics always plays sometimes more than human connection when they're factoring in what they want out of their careers.
And a final question. I think I think everyone in the media right now is wrestling with the extent to which we're all in the Trump business. Ratings go up, traffic goes up, and when Trump sort of crashes into the main story. And I'm curious how you, as I guess in some ways a newcomer to this business, are thinking about that. I do think probably more people will watch your show. I mean, the sort of lesson of the last several years is that more people are going to watch your show when you are railing against Donald Trump than probably anything else. And I'm curious, I don't know how you plan to grapple with those incentives.
Well, I mean, first of all, from my first conversations with Caesar and Rashida, I mean, they never asked me to be a Trump railer, right? Or to not be somebody who has lived and experienced the professional experiences I have had. And even over the last couple of weeks, since I've done 4 shows now, so obviously this is just the beginning here of the
it's
journey.
In your vast experience.
Since we've done only 4 shows. But we try, we're on this constant text chain with these amazing producers I get to work with about not what Trump is doing, but what do people care about? Who do we want to know more about? What are the things that are confusing that we can explain out there? And our hope always with every show is that people come away learning something they didn't know before. And sometimes that's related to something Trump related because it's confusing. What is happening with with his legal woes, I can diplomatically call them. That is something we should explain, but not always. And so far, we have done certainly some time on Trump, but not all, and I expect that's going to be our approach moving forward. We talk a lot about what people's friends are asking them and what their grandmas want to know. We have a grandma check-in after each show. What do grandmas think? Because you want to know. It's how you connect with people.
And it's not Donald Trump so far?
It's not the only thing. And it's a huge story at the same time because he's the former president, he's the current Republican frontrunner. Of course you have to talk about it. But we also have talked a lot about gun violence. We've talked a lot about abortion. We have gone out and spent time with people where they live, where they work, where they spend free time. And that's part of what we hope to do with the show as well.
Well, thank you so much
Thank you, Ben.
for coming by.
Thank you.